Hi.
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 Hello.
I'm curious about
building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about
how do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
So I feel like people are actually getting a lot out of the feeling of compersion. It feels almost altruistic, right? Or it sounds altruistic,
right?
But it almost seems kind of selfish in some ways as well. It's like you really are getting something out of their interactions with others. And for it to be so focused on sexuality, yeah, there's something to be dug out there.
Welcome to the Curious Fox podcast for those challenging the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
And I'm Jacqueline Misla. And today, we're curious about the best strategies for navigating non-monogamous relationships. To do that, we spoke with Dr. Justin Mogilski, who has done international research with non-monogamous folks to understand what behaviors are associated with relationship satisfaction.
We've interviewed a number of researchers over the years, and while we loved and learned from their work, we have been disappointed that the majority of the research is based on studying white, straight, cis people, often college-age men. We were thrilled when we learned of Justin's work. He has published in evolutionary, social, personality, and sexual psychology journals on topics spanning mate poaching, infidelity, cross-gender friendships, consensual non-monogamy, intimate partner conflict, moral decision-making, morphometric cues of partner attractiveness, and multivariate statistical analysis of human mate preference. He and his team have spent years focusing on understanding non-monogamous relationships beyond understanding jealousy, which is where most of existing non-monogamous research and conversation focus.
We walked through the 9 strategies for supporting non-monogamous relationship satisfaction, which emerged from his work. We started with learning about Dr. Mogilski and his work.
My name is Dr. Justin Mogilski. So I'm an assistant professor of psychology at the University of South Carolina, Salkehatchie. Broadly speaking, I was trained as an evolutionary psychologist, and I study how people initiate, maintain, and dissolve different types of romantic relationships. And right now I'm focusing on consensual non-monogamy.
And thank you for doing that.
And we love you for doing that. We arrive fascinated by your work.
Thank you.
Yes. I shared right before we started recording that Effy and I have had the privilege of speaking with researchers and professors, and our conversations and questions are always the same. At some point, we arrive at who were the people being researched here? Are they all white, cis, straight, young men, often from college-age men? Like, is this what this is based on? And so thrilled to learn about not only that you have gone past that population, but that you have an international group that you're researching. And so, can we just start with, before we even dig into what you have found and what that is, what is it that you have been researching?
The international project, it's focused on trying to identify the best and worst strategies for navigating a consensually non-monogamous relationship. So I think people really want to know, okay, maybe I want to be non-monogamous, maybe I want to open up my relationship, maybe I want to be in a polyamorous relationship. How do you do that? And so what we did was we tried to solicit from the community, from just a diverse sample of people who have experience practicing consensual non-monogamy, identify those practices, and then create this scale, this inventory that people can fill out to indicate how often they perform each of those behaviors and whether those behaviors are associated with relationship satisfaction, how often you get into conflict with your partner, your personal health and well-being. So that's the main outcome, is we're trying to identify those practices and see whether they are associated with relationship outcomes.
Fascinating. So basically, how you do non-monogamy well. That's what you're trying to. That's what you're
right.
trying to.
And in the process, we're probably going to identify how people do it not
poorly
well as well. Right. We're trying to quantify that end of the spectrum as well.
Yeah. Before we talk more about it, can you talk about how you arrived here? Why this particular population, this topic, and how you got into this international project?
Yeah. So I like I said, my background is in evolutionary psychology. And I think that for anyone who's familiar with evolutionary psychological research on romantic relationships, there's tons of research on, infidelity and things like mate poaching, and multi-partner relationships have been researched, I think, extensively in that literature, where we're trying to characterize how people navigate those situations where, say, you're with one partner and maybe they're a long-term established committed partner, but then people also have interests in other people, and how do you navigate that space? So that research exists, but most of it was done on monogamous populations. Again, these kind of predominantly white, predominantly heterosexual and monogamous populations. And so when I got into my program, I was on that track. I was interested in that research. I had published work on, so mate poaching is when you go after, when, you're looking for a romantic partner, you go after someone who is currently in a relationship. And the idea is you get into a relationship with them in order to poach them away from their partner, end that relationship, and begin your own relationship with them. So I was into the research from that angle. And I actually, in my program, I met someone, and I briefly was involved with someone who was in a consensually non-monogamous relationship, and they just kind of brought me into the fold. And I was like, how do you do this? Like, is your husband okay with this? And it just kind of progressed from there. And we started collaborating a little bit. We started collecting data, and just to see, okay, what are people doing in these relationships? And if we test some of the hypotheses that have been well tested in this traditional literature, in this new population, do they replicate? Are we seeing the same things? Are people navigating these kinds of relationships in the same way? Some of my early studies, we found that there were some differences overall between monogamous and consensually non-monogamous relationships. You see a lot of similarities in, relationship satisfaction and being able to work together on shared goals and commitment to one another. But there were some differences in, for example, jealousy, and what people term mate retention. That is the effort that you put towards making sure that a partner does not interact with someone else. And from there, because there were these differences, I wanted to see, well, when there are differences, why do they exist? And from there, I got into, as you progress on in an academic career, you have to start writing grants, you have to get money, and you have to make your research more applicable to public health and things like that. And so I found this nice little in-between area where, well, okay, I could keep doing the research that I'm interested in, but also maybe just start to identify, well, okay, when these relationships go well, how are people doing that? And if we gather this data, can it be used to inform, say, relationship therapy or public health interventions that are aimed at resolving some of the problems that you might typically see pop up when people start being non-monogamous? I mean, things like, father absence or spread of STIs, things like that. What are people in polyamorous and consensually non-monogamous relationships doing to alleviate some of the costs that you will otherwise see documented when people commit infidelity in monogamous relationships? So it was really born of this, started with the traditional trajectory of studying romantic relationships, identifying that there's a population that is doing things differently, and then just honestly wanting to know what they're doing, how they're doing it.
That's fascinating. And I think I can also see how this research can be, or the results or what you're finding can be applicable to blended families, post-divorce situations where there are kids involved, where you need to kind of navigate something that doesn't necessarily have to be polyamorous, but just requires people to remain in at least civil relationship because of children, shared finances, property, whatever the reason is. So I can see how it could be totally applicable for that.
I think people are multi-partnering more often than we give credit for. For example, I think for a long time, people didn't consider casual dating or friends with benefits to be a type of consensual non-monogamy. I think it is. I think that in any situation where you are concurrently involved with more than one person, you are practicing non-monogamy. And there are going to be consequences to how you navigate those kinds of relationships. So I think that identifying the best ways is going to be largely applicable far outside of people who are just in C&M relationships, the traditional polyamory, swinging, open relationships. So yeah, I agree with you.
Do you think that it expands beyond the romantic to things like queer platonic relationships or close collaborations. I know that Jackie and I always talk about this because we have such a close relationship, consistent, long-term collaborative relationship that requires navigating, and it's not romantic, right? Though I think some people think that it is. This, apparently, I found out the other day. But it is a significant relationship, right? It's not a relationship that I would in any way dismiss and would make room for as I'm considering my relationships and how all of it fits together. There is, it's on that list of people. Okay, here are the significant relationships in my life. How do I fit those, together? How do I maintain integrity and closeness and connection in this relationship, even though it's not a romantic one, yet remains to be a significant one?
Mm-hmm. I think the best model of that might be people who are asexual, aromantic, where they have these relationships, but they might be more platonic, or they might not be as close in the ways that we traditionally think of as romantic relationships. I would expect that there are probably certain things that people need to do that are specific to the kind of really close romantic, the unique elements of being in a romantic or a sexual relationship. I think there are certain things that you're going to have to resolve in those circumstances. But yes, I'd expect that there are general principles to getting along with people and essentially navigating the moral concerns of being in a group, of living among other people. And how do you treat others ethically? And how do you make sure that, you don't, for example, if you're in a business relationship, not favoring one of your business partners over others and maybe treating them more equitably, how do you navigate that space? I think that there are some principles that generalize. Yeah, for sure.
I can even imagine. Sorry, Jackie. This is what happens when I'm like, what? Somebody has data.
I love it.
The other piece that I can see, I just want to expand on that one more ring, if you will, is that often when I'm talking about polyamory and polycules, especially when people are kind of struggling to wrap their heads around it, I characterize that setup as a micro community. That a polycule, especially an expanded polycule, is essentially a micro community, and it has dynamics that really mimic a community environment. And on the real sort of polyamorous end of non-monogamy. And if you sort of take that, then the research that you're doing, it can also give us best strategies to live in communities.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with that. I think that, so one of the, we can talk about the strategies I've identified, but one of them that we identified was just willingness to care for children, right? And that's a problem that you don't maybe just have to navigate within a pair bond or within people who are romantic related, but at the same time, you might live within a community of people who are not romantically together, who just live in the same area. They maybe share resources. They perhaps live in the same household or several households, where you're going to have to navigate, okay, which people are providing childcare and who's contributing to the greater good, so to speak, right? Who's contributing to everyone's well-being, kind of helping shoulder some of those responsibilities. I think that some of the strategies we've identified would be more applicable to, yes, those broader contexts.
Yeah. So we have been talking around some of the findings that are emerging from your research, and I'm wondering if we can dig into them now and hear what are the things that are working and what are the things that are not.
Sounds good. So maybe I'll just go through. So what we did was we initially identified 10 strategies. We found empirical support for about 9 of them. So I'll just go through them and we can talk about which other ones kind of to pop out. So the big one, the one that I think is going to be the most consequential moving forward, is attraction disclosure. That is, if you are attracted to someone else, whether that's sexually, romantically, or otherwise, do you tell your partner about it or partners about it? I think that there's a very common habit, I think especially among people who are monogamous, to, if you feel attraction to someone else, first off, feel shame about it, right? And then also hide that from your partner. Don't let them know about it. Kind of that secret crush, that secret flirtation, just kind of keep that to yourself. Don't open up trouble. And what we're finding is that people who engage in more attraction disclosure, almost more than all the other strategies that I've identified, they are more likely to have higher relationship quality, higher sexual satisfaction. They tend to be more committed, more invested in their partners. So the people who are doing that seem to be doing better for some reason. We're not sure why, but attraction disclosure is a big one.
So with the attraction disclosure, is there a correlation, do we think maybe people who feel that they can disclose their attraction to others feel that they're in a more secure relationship, which allows them to reveal who they're attracted to outside the relationship? Or is it that because they do that, the relationship is more secure?
So that's a good point, because the data that I've collected so far is correlational. So we don't know whether the direction of the effect goes one way or the other. Is the attraction disclosure causing people to be more satisfied, or are they already satisfied and therefore they're more likely to do that? And that's why, just as a short note, we actually are doing a follow-up experimental study where we try to manipulate some of these variables, where we ask people to do these things in their relationship and see how that affects their relationship outcome. So the short answer is, I don't know. But I would guess there's part of that, right? Is where if you're already feeling secure, then there might be less risk to disclosing that information. Whereas if you're already fairly insecure, the relationship's on the rocks, or that you're just not there in your relationship yet, then adding that extra element in there could hurt more than it helps. But based on the data we've collected so far, I'm not the only people who seem to be hurt by not disclosing attraction are people who are already in a multi-partner relationship of some type. So those who are people who are monogamous, whether they reveal their attraction to other people or not, it seems to be positive overall. But actually, people who are in multiple relationships, if they don't disclose that attraction, they are reporting lower relationship quality. So there seems to be something specific to being in that type of relationship and disclosing attraction that's associated with higher quality.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit with that now.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to tease that one apart either, but yeah.
Okay.
So jealousy, you said number 2?
Jealousy.
Jealousy regulation. So how we word these questions is we ask people how comfortable they feel communicating with their partner about jealousy. So it's not whether you do it. It's not whether you're effective at it, but it's sort of how you're effective at it. But do you even feel that you can communicate that information to your partner? Those who feel more competent in doing that tend to report higher relationship quality. And just very briefly, we measured primarily 3 domains. So overall relationship satisfaction, investment quality, that is how interdependent you are with your partner, how much you feel that you have kind of shared goals and shared directions in life, and then also sexual attraction. So across all 3 of those, jealousy regulation was associated with higher scores on all of those. Yeah.
Did you get any insight into how they're doing this? Like, what are the best ways of regulating jealousy and communicating jealousy?
We don't get that from this data. What I've found in some of my other work is that, so just to briefly touch on it, we measured jealousy once using something called the multidimensional jealousy scale, which looks at 3 different facets. Emotional jealousy, which is that like hot, heavy, you found out that your partner's cheating on you. Now you kind of have that very anxious, kind of worried feeling deep in your gut. There's behavioral jealousy, which is close to mate retention. How often do you kind of make sure that your partner doesn't stray? And then the other is cognitive jealousy, which is how often do you think about it? How often do you ruminate about jealousy or consider that your partner is with someone else? We actually found that people in CNM relationships were overall much lower in emotional jealousy than monogamous people, but they were actually slightly higher in, at least as it was measured with the scale, higher in cognitive jealousy, meaning they might be thinking about it more. So my guess is, and I don't have data to support this, but my guess is that people are thinking about the jealousy, perhaps, working through it. Perhaps I think my guess is one of the best strategies would be a lot of cognitive reframing, right? Where you think about an emotion, you're aware of the fact that you're having that emotion, and then you try to reinterpret the situation in a way that is ultimately beneficial for your relationship. So if that jealousy is not working for you, if it's not helping you in some way, then try to find a way to experience it in a way that does ultimately help rather than hurt the relationship. From the data though, we're not getting that granularity. We just know that people who are communicating about it effectively and who feel that they are doing better.
Fascinating. Yeah. Okay, so what's next? Okay.
So the third one, the big one, was childcare willingness, and this came from. So to give some background on how we came up with some of these strategies in the first place, is one of the problems that you see again and again is that getting involved with more than one person might divide a person's time spent with a particular partner or the investments that they might make with a particular person. And children are one of those investments, one of those shared responsibilities that, if you get involved with someone else, your partner could start to spend a lot more time, say, on their mating game, right? On actually interacting with romantic partners, rather than maybe caring for children that they've already had with another partner. And so the idea here was that maybe people who are more willing to care for children, they're more willing to put in that effort, might be having better relationship outcomes because it guards against some of the negative consequences of, say, not taking care of children and just going off and doing something else. So that tended to be associated more with overall relationship quality as well as interdependence, the quality of the investment.
So in my particular dynamic, I have a daughter with my ex-husband, and now I'm remarried and I have a partnership. Neither my wife or my partner wanted children, nor do they play a parental role in my daughter's life. But to your point, there is an understanding and a commitment to my relationship and commitment to my daughter, and understanding that does impact my time with them. And there's an understanding and acceptance overall that is the case, that when my daughter has an event, when she's over for the night, all of those things, that my time will shift in order to spend with her. And so even though they are not directly caring for her, they're caring for her via supporting me in my care for her.
Yeah, via their respect for your time and that boundary that you need to keep for yourself for the sake of caring for your daughter. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the willingness to take care of children, are you measuring for taking care of your own children or taking care of children within the polycule?
So this is helping your partner take care of their children, which could be related to you, right? And so what we've done is we've asked that question, and then we also ask them, are these children that you help take care of, if there are children, are they genetically related to you or are they not? We haven't delved too far into that data. We haven't really broken that apart. That wasn't our initial focus. But one of the, I think, predictions you'd expect is that people who are in a relationship and there's a child that's not related to them, especially if stepfathers, for example, are notorious for not allocating as much effort into someone, genetically unrelated children. So we would guess that specifically men, and this was one of our gender difference predictions. We thought that men who were more willing to care for children who were genetically unrelated to them would be experiencing greater relationship quality just by virtue of their willingness to invest that effort. Where, overall, otherwise, there can be some rather unfortunate, I think, consequences or kind of outcomes of step parenthood. Sometimes it's a well-established pattern, I should say. Not that that's the case all the time, but yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Again, I'm curious to whether you're willing to invest in the kids more because you're satisfied within your relationship, therefore you want to maintain it, or your willingness to take care of kids make you more satisfied within your relationship. I guess that's also unknown, to be continued, to be explored in the future.
Right. Yeah, we can't answer that without the experimental data. Yep.
Just based on my own experience, it has not been my experience that caring for a kid is a strategy to maintain the relationship. I think it is around, again, kind of the tolerance around it and what does that look like. But at least in my particular experience and the folks that I've dated and now in partnership with, that if there was not already a pre-existing interest in playing a role in a child's life, that did not develop for the reason of being in partnership.
That's interesting, though. Do you feel like that's a mentality that people could foster, though? I mean, is that something that can change, or are we just kind of almost dispositionally, I'm a child care kind of person, I'm willing to do it anyway, or just someone who's turned off to it and doesn't want to do it?
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's been more of a willingness to play almost like an uncle aunt kind of role of, I will have the closeness of the care of, some responsibility. But at the end of the day, I essentially drop them back off to you, and you do the parenting piece. And so that may have expanded from, I don't want to be around children, to I will play an important role in a child's life. But for at least in my experience with the folks that I've been with, it has not crossed the line over into parenting world.
I think maybe the age of the child also makes a difference. I think taking care of a baby is different than taking care of a a tween, teen, and maybe that also makes a difference along the way. So Justin, your question was, do you think that you can cultivate a mindset to where you decide to take care of a kid? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah. Or is that something that if these are ultimately strategies that we would be encouraging people to adopt, I mean, is that realistic? Can you induce someone to cultivate that mindset? Or is that, something that would be an effective intervention? Or is that so, I don't want to say deeply ingrained, but is the preference already there and people are either going to put that effort in or they're not?
Mm-hmm. All right. We both have a million questions about each of them, but we have 17 minutes and 7 more strategies. Right. So if you can talk through the rest and then we can ask some questions at the end.
Sounds good. So the next one is compersion. And that one's probably familiar. So just that feeling of enjoying a partner's interactions with other people and being happy for them. So that was associated with higher relationship quality, but specifically, and we might be able to dig into this, sexual satisfaction. So compersion was most strongly associated with sexual satisfaction. So there seems to be something maybe that people are more likely to feel that enjoyment if it's specifically targeted toward their partner's physical interactions with other people.
Yes, I can see that. I think my compersion generally has lived in that specific space, in the sexual space.
Is that right?
Of not compersion over their happiness over a long walk holding hands through the park. But if they had a particularly playful evening, I would be more interested in hearing about that and experiencing joy for myself through their experience of joy of their sexual experiences. Yeah.
Is that compersion or is that kink though?
I think they blend together. I don't know. Go ahead.
They do blend together. No, and I was going to say, I think there is a fine line there. I think compersion is often talked about as just like general feeling of enjoyment of their partner's interactions with others and pleasure from it. And it's almost seemed like a very almost ethical reaction to your partner's interactions with others. But there does almost seem to be something very gratifying, and I guess in this case, almost sexually gratifying about cultivating that feeling. So I feel like people are actually getting a lot out of the feeling of compersion. It feels almost altruistic, right? Or it sounds altruistic, right? But it almost seems kind of selfish in some ways as well. It's like you really are getting something out of their interactions with others. And for it to be so focused on sexuality, there's something to be dug out there. There are researchers looking at compersion, but there's just not a lot of data on distinguishing kind of that emotional compersion versus sexual compersion.
Sure. Or intellectual compersion, which is something that I would also throw in there. Like where you actually do the work to wrap your head around it in a way to counteract some of the negative feelings that you might be doing. So it's like just like we're saying about jealousy, right? I think probably the 3 different dimensions that you're looking at jealousy will apply to compersion as 3 different dimensions. And I think cognitive or intellectual compersion is a thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is it intellectual because you're reasoning yourself there, or is it that?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That you're reasoning, reframing yourself there so that you're like something that might otherwise bring up jealousy or negative feelings or self-doubt. You kind of reframing it in a way so that it shows up as compersion.
Gotcha. Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, I can see that. The next one is called shared extra-pair sexuality. So this is if you are in a relationship and say you are starting to interact with a third person or other people, do you involve your partner in those interactions? So some people are very much, I want to be involved. I want to watch. I want to be there. I want to see what's going on. I want to be kept in the loop just 100% of the time. And then I think that there are people who are relatively less so on that, where they say, go off. I don't really want to hear about it. I don't want to see it. What we're seeing is that people who do that, who share those experiences, do tend to have higher relationship quality than those who do not share. And I imagine my guess is that that's going to depend on a person's circumstances, that there might be some personality variables or some aspect of the relationship that could make not sharing those experiences better for some people, but it looks like overall sharing's better than not.
So orgies for all.
Orgies for everyone. So to link back to the first strategy, was there a distinction between involving my partner in the sexual experience or involving them so that they are in the know about the sexual experiences that I'm engaged in?
Yeah, so the specific questions, I'll actually read it. So it's the questions are telling your partner about sexual fantasies, including your partner's in the fantasy. So we said fantasies because we tried to make this applicable to people who are actually having sex with other people, but also such that monogamous people could answer it. So it's more of if there is something sexual happening involving your partner in those interactions. So actually them being there. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Nice. And next, this is fascinating.
Yes. And next, keep going. All right. Partner hierarchy. I think this is a big one and one that I really want to tease apart. Partner hierarchy. So the extent to which you tend to give one or a few people priority in your life such that they have greater influence over the decisions that you make. If you do make decisions, do you tend to favor one partner over the other? And so I think this is one of those dimensions. You also see people, there's variability in how effective this is, such that if I think of people who like swingers or those where you have usually an established couple or an established relationship, and then they bring people into that. And there's this very explicit acknowledgement that, okay, if something goes south or there's incompatibility here, I'm going to prioritize my partner's well-being, how interested they are in the relationship versus the third partner, versus kind of taking this more egalitarian, trying not to treat one partner as superior, not giving them priority. Of course, from moment to moment, some people may have more need than the other. And so you might, for a short period of time, give one person more attention, more energy, et cetera. But overall, an effort to minimize that hierarchy.
And which had more satisfaction?
And who?
No hierarchy. Yeah.
That was one of those variables that was very weakly associated. I think overall, those with more hierarchy, funnily enough, had higher satisfaction with their interdependence. That is, their investment with one another. It was not associated with overall relationship satisfaction. So it specifically was more satisfied with the investment. Which I guess kind of makes sense.
Yeah. It's like, because especially, so what I hear from that is, that's essentially about teamwork, right? Because it's not about relationship satisfaction, pleasure. That's about, excuse my French, getting shit done together, right? Because you're looking at interdependence. So doing life together, and therefore you want to know who your teammates are. Therefore you can allocate accordingly, and things get done or things don't get done, and you know who's doing what, when, and how. So that makes sense to me that having clear hierarchy just makes teamwork better. Like, I don't need to even go into a romantic situation. So that makes sense to me. I'm not surprised by that.
If there are clear boundaries, if you're sharing resources, you want to know that those resources are going where they will, and that they will be reciprocated to you, right? Because if you prioritize one partner, the assumption is they'll probably prioritize you too. Right. And that there might be some security in that. Though I'd argue just because that might be the more secure strategy doesn't mean that would be the best strategy in a given situation, because it could be that bringing more people into the relationship, treating them more equitably, creates more resources than if you were to kind of hoard them and keep them closed away in just a pair bond. So that's, again, one of those factors I really want to crack into a little bit.
I love that this is now 10 research assignments are going to pop out of these 10 strategies, and multiple after that. Yeah.
I would love that.
Okay, so what's next?
Okay, so the next is resource distribution. So how often you consider how resources are distributed among partners. Do you tend to, so this is not so much are you prioritizing a partner, but are you even thinking about, are you conscientious of how you spend time? How often you engage in sexual activity, how often you share money or resources, physical resources among the different partners. So those who are less conscientious about that seem to report lower relationship quality than those who are more conscientious about that. And that, I think, is one of those factors that might be more applicable to platonic relationships, even just groups of people figuring out how people share resources and whether people are receiving a fair or equitable allotment of them.
I can also see I feel like the roots of this is in evolutionary psychology, where which is your absolute your wheelhouse, right? We know that the groups that did that well survived, right? Versus those that didn't. So I feel like that has like deep roots in just humanity in general. Before you even get to romantic, would you say that?
Yeah. So you're looking at it almost at a group selection level, which, you'd go in the evolutionary research, whether we should be looking at whether groups are succeeding based on their resource sharing or whether individuals' genes are succeeding. There's a distinction there. But overall, I agree that I think that's a fundamental problem of how people, when they are living within a group, how do you share resources with others? And ultimately, whether that's done effectively or not is going to determine whether being in that group is worthwhile, whether it's benefiting you as a person, and then, of course, the stability of that group. So as much as a relationship is a partnership or a group to be maintained, then to do that poorly is to essentially convince the other person, hey, I'm not getting as much out of this as I should be, right? Like I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting the resources that I think are fair to me. And so I just don't want to be part of this anymore. I think that's the level to look at it. I personally look at relationships as almost like alliances, as these agreements that you make to get something done and or to work on something together, and you're going to get something back from it. If you're not getting enough back from it, it's very logical, very reasonable to say, well, this just isn't worth my time. I'm not going to sink effort into it.
Completely makes sense.
Absolutely. The question that I ask my clients all the time, what do you want this relationship to afford you?
Yeah.
Because that's why we end up in a relationship. And I reiterate that it's not about transaction, but we are creating something that is being created to afford us something, whatever that is. And what is that? And does everybody have the same expectations or same desires of what the relationship wants to afford them? So I love hearing that. Next, keep blowing our minds.
Next. All right. Sexual health maintenance. This actually might be no surprise. So how we asked these questions were, how willing are people to take sexual risks? So that is, would you be willing to have sex with someone if there were a chance that you would contract a minor STI? How often do you use condoms? How often do you get tested for STIs when you're involved with multiple people? So no surprise, those who are more conscientious about that do tend to be happier or more satisfied in their relationships overall. What we're really looking forward to is we do gather some actual health data in one of our surveys that we've administered. So looking at whether that factor is associated with better personal health outcomes, that's going to be that's really going to validate that particular item, that category.
That's interesting too, also in the time of the pandemic and COVID, and how any of those safer sex practices translated to safe practices overall in terms of connection with others.
I mean, that's, I think, one of the fears that people have of non-monogamy in general is that you are bringing in more than another person. It's harder to keep track of who's been with who. And I think that's just kind of in the back of someone's mind. So I think when people are regularly testing, when they are engaging in these health practices, they're really alleviating the anxiety that comes from that, right? From not doing that, I should say.
Yeah. That makes sense.
All right. And the last one, because this is the ninth one, the last one that actually was validated is reputation management. So that is, how often do you tend to hide things about your romantic relationship from your partner and from other people? So that is, do you hide the fact that you are non-monogamous from your family, friends? Do you talk about it that often? And so those who tend to hide it more, unsurprisingly, usually have worse relationship outcomes. And this is a large literature at this point. We know that there's stigma against people who are in consensually non-monogamous, people who are non-monogamous in general. And that gets in the way of people seeking out, advice for managing the relationships or seeking, relationship therapy, because they don't publicly want to announce, hey, I'm in a relationship with multiple people, because there's that stigma there.
I imagine for so many reasons that's a block. Number one, it means not identifying with it in a way that you own it. And then I imagine it means then not having access to community, support systems, friends, others that would really support you in it because of your desire to keep it closeted. Yeah.
Yes. I love that distinction. Yeah.
Also, sharing strategies on how to do this stuff, right? So, because if you're not disclosing, you're not part of a community, which means you don't get the shared knowledge, experience, along with the support and being seen and heard and all those beautiful things. Okay.
And that's one of the reasons I like doing this work, is because when you publish something and it's done scientifically, it kind of cuts through that noise and it says, hey, listen, despite what you believe or what you think, we have this data here, and now we can share these strategies. We can share these different ways of doing this that people can read about, they can incorporate into the relationship, but they don't necessarily need that community input to learn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So those are 10 factors, those are 10 strategies that your research has been asking internationally with folks who are either practicing non-monogamy or are monogamous but considering non-monogamy. Was that?
They don't even have to be considering it. It could just be monogamous. Yeah.
Got it. So that you can understand the distinction between the populations.
That's right. Yeah. And this was actually one of the challenges we had to get by is how do you ask these questions in a way that someone who's monogamous could answer them? And we figured it out. So yeah, we were able to directly compare monogamous people who do these things versus multi-partner people who do these things.
Got it. Okay. And were there any surprises for you?
Surprises. Well, there are always surprises in administration. There's always surprises in trying to get this survey out and trying to find people. I would say this might be interesting. This isn't really related to the data, but one of the sampling procedures that we used were paid promoted social media advertisements. So paying Facebook, paying Twitter to get this out there. And that can target, everyone who's 18 years or above within the United States, for example. And doing that, the amount of flack that I got. So this was like an innocuous advertisement. It was like, hey, we're just interested in what people who are in relationships with multiple people at once, what they do to make the relationship work. And so many people started trolling that post and posting really just nasty, like, Satan, stay away from me. And, how could you, there are children on this platform. How could you be promoting this? So I think more than ever, I'm convinced that there's this really, really tough environment where if you're non-monogamous, it's, oh boy, of course you want to hide it, right?
Yeah. And you had noted earlier on, I think before we started recording, we were talking about some of the surprises when you are speaking with folks about this work. And because you and we are so involved in this, that the knowledge gap sometimes can be surprising. And so when folks say, I've had the same thing, that, it must mean you and all your partners have STIs. And, that must mean, that you're not paying attention to your daughter, et cetera. And it sounds like the research is showing, well, let me ask you that question. Apart from indicating what are the strategies that folks who are in multiple relationships can do to maintain happiness within their relationships, was there any indication around the happiness overall between those in non-monogamous relationships and those in monogamous relationships? Is there any indication around thriving overall?
In differences, that we didn't observe differences. And we've seen this in nationally represented data as well of very large samples. I think some of the best researchers in that field who published on this are people like Amy Moores, Rhonda Balzerini, David Rodriguez. They're all showing, Heath Seckinger, they're all showing that people are, when you compare monogamous and CNM people, they're having many of the same relationship outcomes. They're dealing with the same stuff, right? CNM in a lot of ways is like a monogamous relationship, except you have the added factor of another person. But you're still trying to coordinate resources. You're still trying to deal with jealousy sometimes. You're still having all the experiences that you would expect. So no, that we're not observing those differences. What we're observing is differences in what people do in those relationships and how they navigate the different relationship problems that they encounter, but they both seem to be effective in managing those problems. It's just how they do it, and that's what this studies.
I'm curious about, because this is an international study, and I'm a multinational person. I grew up across the world, so I'm curious to what kind of differences you're getting in your results depending on the countries that you're doing your research in.
So far, we're not seeing many differences. One of the things that we did to validate our scale is we do what's called factor analysis, and then part of that is you do invariance analyses where you look at whether the way that people responded to the scale were different across different groups that you can create. So looking at people who not only the biggest samples that we have, the ones that I would say that I'm most confident in making a conclusion about is the US versus Europe. It looks like US versus Europe, there aren't really many differences. Kind of surprisingly, right? You almost expect that there'd be differences in how people are navigating non-monogamy, but at least for the strategies that we've identified, there aren't that many differences. So for example, things like age, those who are relatively older versus those who are relatively younger, there's no difference between them. Now, there may be difference in how often they engage in certain behaviors, but there are no differences in the pattern of filling out the questionnaire overall. And so it seems that these strategies are tapping into something similar for everyone. But there are some differences in say, how comfortable people are about communicating about jealousy between those who are older versus younger. As people have more experience in a relationship, they tend to have more competence in communicating about it. So yeah, we're not seeing huge differences. But I think one of the what I expect is once we break out into many of the more conservative or traditional societies where the sexual mores are more restricted, we've had some difficulty finding them for obvious reasons. What I would expect is that there might be more secrecy and there may be more exclusivity in those communities in terms of how people are practicing them, what terminology they use to navigate specific issues. But in terms of these strategies, yeah, people seem to be tapping into something more universal. I'm going to make that a very soft claim. Something more universal.
I find that fascinating because things like, for example, the resource piece, right? I'd be curious to see how, I don't know, somewhere like the US where we're like wild capitalism versus somewhere like Sweden or Denmark where you have essentially very established functioning socialism, right? So those two, macro environments, I would imagine have an impact on the micro community environment where you're looking at resource management, right? So I'm surprised that it just doesn't show up in different countries. It's fascinating.
It might be a matter of a shared philosophy of those who are consensually non-monogamous, right? I think people who are non-monogamous overall are thinking about how they're interacting with others, how they're managing the relationship. So it could just be that is its own kind of philosophical
makes sense.
Community. Or they have their own approach, and that's what's being shared.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah. Continues to fascinate me. This is like #fascinating is going to be the theme for this episode.
I think that what it makes sense in that it sounds like the overall strategies fall into the buckets of self-reflection and self-regulation, empathy, communication, things that should make hopefully your own relationship with self and relationship and partnership thrive. And so it makes sense for me, I guess, that there is those strategies across the world because communication does improve things. Hopefully self-reflection does improve things. Empathy does improve things. I think that what I'm interested in, to your point, is those last ones around being able to tell your family and friends, around the hierarchy piece, when resource allocation means different things in different places, how those things show up as stressors to a relationship. And I imagine that folks would leverage those other strategies to navigate through those particular stressors. So even though those things will come up as complications, there'll be more communication, there would be more empathy, there would be more self-regulation, self-reflection.
Yeah, perhaps across different environments or cultures, there are certain problems that are more prominent, right? So if the problem is stigma, in some places there are going to be more stigma than others. So the strategy should differ based on what the problem is, what problem that strategy addresses. The strategy itself, though, might be relatively universal.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense.
And I guess that kind of speaks to your point. And that was really one of the original motivations for this. Is we thought that, so from my background, this evolutionary background, I think that there are fairly consistent issues that people have to deal with. We could really get ancient here and talk about the problems of cuckoldry, right? Of a partner having a child that is, genetically unrelated to you, or say a partner who, because they don't have to invest in offspring, they have a lower minimum obligation in offspring because they contribute sperm versus someone else contributes egg. There are problems with how relationships are invested into a partnership. I think those are the universal problems. And those are what, say, some societies might be better at kind of managing than others based on, whether it's a capitalistic structure versus something that's a little bit more communal. So I would expect that the problems differ across society to some degree, but there are universal elements as well. And these strategies hopefully universally address them.
And so your research is included, and it's been peer evaluated amongst the folks who have been engaged in this process. Can you give us a little sense of when will the results officially be live and published?
And will you come back?
Of course I'll come back. When they'll be live. So the manuscript is almost done. Been tossing it back and forth, working on it. You got to make, peer, when something goes through peer review, you want to make sure you address absolutely everything you possibly can beforehand, especially if we're shooting for a higher end journal, so that this can have the highest impact as possible. So right now, yes, a good point. The results are not published. They've been peer reviewed by the team, which is a set of other academics, but it's not officially published yet. That is what I would guess, given the normal time frame. I would guess maybe sometime next year it would be out, just because it takes a while for peer review.
Yeah. And then at that point, yes, and even beforehand, we'd love to continue to have a conversation. But before you go, we want to do a little bit of research on you. And so we have 4 questions that we would like to ask you to get to know you a little bit more before we close. The first of which is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self about love, sex, or relationships?
I think that when people approach relationships, they're going to have their own experiences. They're going to have their own perspective on what they fear, what they enjoy, what they're worried about, and to get outside of yourself and to think about what another person's experiences have been and what they are and how they differ from your own, I think gives you that empathy element. It gives you that ability to say, oh, okay, this is what I prioritize in the relationship, but now I understand why you prioritize something else. To understand that about another person, I think gives you a huge leg up in just leading a satisfying romantic life.
That's such a grand notion for like my younger self. If I could just get my younger self to understand that, I think definitely it would be great advice. Okay. What is one romantic or sexual adventure on your bucket list?
I like meeting different people. So I feel like my overall bucket is just meet different people, get different perspectives, and kind of make those connections. I like making connections to people. So I don't know if there's like some grand thing I want to do. It's just, each person's going to be their own story, and I kind of want to hear them.
Oh, I love that answer. How do you challenge the status quo?
Well, professionally or...
Yeah, part of it is self-evident. I think you're challenging right now things within the research world by the very work that you're doing, but certainly either professionally or personally.
I guess professionally, given that much of this, this sounds like a really boring answer, but given that a lot of this research is done on monogamous people and it's done in this very niche population, then just doing it and talking about it and having that data out there, I think does challenge a little bit. I'll say this. You remember those comments that people were making about the post that my promoted social media advertisement? I think one of my favorite was something like, you are directly complicit in the downfall of the nuclear family and stuff like that. So apparently I must be challenging the status quo of like marriage and family structure. I don't know if I agree with that, but we'll say that.
Sure. Indeed. I would imagine the strategies that you're researching are actually saving marriages versus breaking them up.
Totally agree.
So we're a curious bunch around here, and we are curious about what you're curious about lately.
Just broadly, what am I curious about? I am curious about, this is totally unrelated, virtual reality, VR, and just how we're going to integrate VR in every aspect of our life. It's my personal belief that when the technology becomes cheap enough and widely available enough, I think that we are genuinely going to live in the metaverse. And that's actually going to be a really, really good thing for everyone. Once we get through all the hiccups and some of the challenges of doing that, I think that's going to be a win-win across the board.
You've just tapped into one of Effy's biggest
curiosities. Yeah. No, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's going to eliminate barriers to people being able to go and do the things that would normally require like material privilege, right? So that is if, say, you want to go to a certain university and you live on the other side of the world, being able to beam in and physically feel like you are there, even though you're not, I think it's going to have huge, huge implications for education.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think that is number one thing for VR. I think it's going to be fascinating and amazing for education, and it's going to remove barriers. Exactly what you said. That's like one of my top things. You're going to be able to learn from whom, whenever you want, and it's not going to be you can just do it from the comfort of your own chair.
Yes.
And because when you're in VR, I think there is a possibility that the socioeconomic barriers are going to erode. Also, just because we're going to be in our avatars, right? Because we do so much of our judgment and upon meeting people in the way they look, in the way they dress, in the way, right? And that's gonna fall away. it's going to be mostly based on your creative expression, right? And now we're going to start judging people on a completely new visual connection. So fascinating.
I love that. I love that. I would love to have a whole conversation about that. That's just, yeah.
We'll do it.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate time and authentically appreciative of the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. This was fun.
Yes, absolutely. Would love to have you back.
You can follow Dr. Justin Mogilski on Twitter at Justin_Mogilski and read his published work through Google Scholar and ResearchGate. We've added links in our show notes. And while you're online, check us out on our website and Facebook group, all under the name We Are Curious Foxes. We want to increase our reach and we need your help, so please share our podcast or this episode with a friend. Quickly rate the show, leave a comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcast or follow us on Spotify and Stitcher. To support the show and indulge your curiosity, join us on Patreon at We Are Curious Foxes, where you can find behind-the-scenes footage, mini episodes, and over 50 videos from educator-led workshops. Go to Patreon at We Are Curious Foxes. And let us know that you're listening by sharing a comment, a story, or a question. You can email us or send us a voice memo to listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com, or you can record a question for the show by calling us at 646-450-9079.
This episode is produced and edited by Nina Pollock, who is our #1 strategy for podcast satisfaction. Our intro music is composed by Dev Saha. We are so grateful for their work, and we're grateful to you for listening. As always, stay curious, friends. Sorry.
We started with learning about Dr. Mogilski. We started with learning about Dr. Mogilski. Oh, fuck. Why can't I say it? Mogilski. Okay.
Stay curious, friends. Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.